Welcome back to Main Street Success Stories. I'm your host, Jennifer Koch. Today's guest, Molly Bossardt, with Bread to Butter Digital Marketing, started her business in 2020 with a focus on helping small town businesses, particularly wineries, modernize their marketing strategies. She emphasizes the importance of niching, which allows her to cater to wineries' unique challenges. And she's a huge advocate for a 360-degree marketing approach. And today, that's what we're going to talk about. So I invite you to listen in and learn about the key points that she makes about adopting a 360-degree marketing approach that's going to help you attract more customers into your business. Welcome to the Main Street Success Stories podcast. I'm your host, Jennifer Koch. I've been a business owner for about 25 years, and now I'm a business coach. I actually turned my first business into a franchise and successfully sold it after owning and operating it for 20 years. I prioritize building a business while also building a life and love working with the creative entrepreneur. I mostly work with emerging business owners who desire growth. They are in their first 5 years of the journey and want a plan that's going to help them succeed for years to come. They're tired of not getting paid enough, feel stuck, and want more for their business and family. If you are a business owner and you're feeling stressed about how to attract more customers, you have a really good sales month, but then you look at your bank account and wonder where the money went. You look at your financial statements, but if you're being honest, you're not really sure what to do with the information. And you just tell yourself, if I work harder, it'll fix all my issues, only to feel exhausted and never see things improve. You're here because you want to build your business, but you also want to build a life that you love. I invite you to learn more about one of my 3 coaching programs designed to help you earn more and stress less. You can choose which option works best for you. Imagine this. You have a clear plan and momentum, and you're gaining more clients every week. Your revenue climbs by 20% or more. You save 5 hours a week because you know exactly where to show up. You're experiencing double-digit growth in your profits. People refer customers to your business because they understand exactly who you help and what you do. If this is you and you desire more, reach out, let's have a conversation, and you can click in the show notes below. Molly, thank you so much for joining me today. I am excited to dive into marketing because it's a question I get asked all the time, as I'm sure you do.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, my entire business is around marketing, so it's all I talk about all day, pretty much every day, and think about.
Well, good. I'm glad that we get to tap into your wisdom today. So first of all, tell us, what you do, where you're located, and how long you've been in business.
Yeah, so a little bit about my origin story. I was living and working in New York City up until the pandemic. For about 10 years, I had been living there, and like everyone else, did a bit of a shuffle, and I moved back to my hometown in Charlottesville. And I had worked in marketing prior to my move. And I looked around at some of the small businesses and really noticed this huge gap between, I hate to say this, but comparing businesses in Brooklyn and New York, small businesses, to the small businesses here and their online presence. And I was kind of shocked at how far behind people were here in this small town. So when I initially started my business in 2020, it was really to help those smaller companies, the smaller businesses, attract more clients through either organic social media, email marketing, and website design. So I just, that's really where I started my business. It's taken some evolutions, and now I primarily focus on working with wineries. So same kind of offerings, right? So I'm mostly handling, it varies, but it depends upon the client, really. A lot of 360-degree kind of marketing. So really everything where I am almost the outsourced marketing team for these wineries. And then I have also specialized in delivering services for advertising on Meta in particular. So digital advertising services.
So you started
now.
Okay, so you started in 2020, and the thought at the time was, let's focus on small businesses. But you niched into wineries, which I love because we're always talking about niching and growing our businesses. It's key. It's a very key element. How did you end up taking care of and servicing wineries?
Yeah, so I love wine. I love the wine industry. I had worked at a winery prior, like at some point in my career. It was when I was about 25. I moved back home for a year, worked at a winery, and then I went back to grad school. And also Charlottesville, I'm not sure if listeners know, but Charlottesville and Virginia is this burgeoning wine scene. So it's getting a lot of press. New wineries are opening up every year. Sometimes it's multiple times a year, like there are new wineries opening up, so it's really a big industry here. And similar to the small businesses being behind the times, wineries are very much behind the times. So yeah, I thought my skill set would match perfectly with that industry that I love.
What a fun job working at a winery. I always say if I need a second gig, I'm going to go work at a coffee shop, but maybe I'll add winery to the list too.
Yeah, you should. I mean, it is a fun job. It's a lot of hard work. The tasting room staff, they are hustling and grind, it can be a lot, but I think it's really fun because you get to meet a lot of new people. I mean, I did this when I was 25. It was the best part-time job I've ever had.
Yeah.
It was a blast, and you get to learn so much about the industry. So yeah, that was my first glimpse about the like into the industry. I, as a consumer, had been consuming wine prior to that and had studied abroad in Italy, which was kind of pivotal in, my relationship with wine and understanding wine as part of culture. So yeah, it is fun. I mean, if anybody lives near a winery, they should definitely get a part-time job there.
No kidding. So you said a couple times there was this gap with the online presence in a smaller town with wineries. And I'm wondering with wineries, is it because a lot of them are family owned, they're generational, they kind of, get passed down generation to generation, and maybe some of the tactics they were using before aren't working anymore? Is that some of the things that you sensed when you started working with wineries?
Yeah. So yes, spot on. A lot of them are family run, and owned. There is also this gap in age. So if you look at like majority of people who are owning and operating wineries still are older people, right? They are, you know, 60 and upwards, probably 70 and upwards. A lot of them are, men, and a lot of them are just out of touch with young consumers. And something that your audience probably doesn't know because they're not in the wine industry is that the wine industry is in a panic mode because young people are not consuming wine at the rate that they should be, right? And you have an aging population of boomers who are aging out of spending a lot of money on wine. So, right, their budgets, they're retiring, they need to tighten their budgets. So that's one thing that's happening. So they're consuming a little bit less, and then they are passing away, right? They're leaving the world as you age. That's what happens.
Right.
So
It's bound to happen, right?
it's bound to happen, and so the wine industry has done a very poor job of capturing a younger audience. And there's a lot of reasons that I think they have done a bad job. First of all, they're very resistant to like modern marketing. They're resistant to being on social media, updating their website, really doing any kind of digital marketing. And let's be honest, that's the only marketing that matters in 2024. I mean, print is dead and buried. Um, and I don't know, like I don't know where you stand, but if you are not online, you are not going to get customers. Like
Well,
not even
absolutely.
it's not even young
Yes.
people anymore. Even my mother, who is 68, I mean, she's not tech savvy at all. I've had to help her a lot recently with a lot of techie things, but she's on Instagram. She's on Google. She's looking at businesses in those capacities. Yes, word of mouth is still valid. And I think that's something that can be fostered and definitely a tactic. But yeah, they just aren't there. I think of winery people who are making decisions at most of the wineries are pretty old school, right? They're also like have a very romantic and traditional feelings about wine. Wine is deeply rooted in tradition and terroir. So, like your region where you're, growing your grapes. And a lot of people are focused on making the best product that they can make, but they really forget about the consumer and how do we sell this product. And so that's the issue there that's going on. But I do see like what's happening is a lot of those people are starting to age out and sell their wineries, and younger people who, have made a lot of money in another industry are purchasing these wineries, and those are the people who are really open to investing in marketing and trying to reach a younger audience. And I've had some great, case studies around clients that are in that, in that kind of a scenario.
So let's talk about investing in your marketing because, you're talking about the wine industry because that's your niche, which I love. And a lot of my listeners are trying to grow a local business, whether it's brick and mortar, service-based, photography business, their clients in their local market, which is pretty similar to a winery, even though, I know they can ship and whatnot. But let's talk about investing in marketing. I think marketing is this big, huge, almost elephant in the room for business owners. They get overwhelmed by it. They're not really sure, what part to bite off. And I think there's some really unrealistic expectations with marketing. Would you agree with that?
Yeah. I think a lot of people don't really understand. Well, there's a lot that people don't understand. They don't, sometimes I find people think it's really easy and they kind of dismiss it. So there's that group. And then there's, I'm sure the group, which I tend to like almost see a little bit more of. Then there's the group that, I don't know, maybe like I'm trying to think about the type of person that would be listening to this more brick and mortar. Maybe they're overwhelmed, but they just don't know how to like tackle it, right? They know it's a big job. So instead of breaking it down and tackling pieces of it, they probably ignore it or they do it here and there, right? So it's like a very scattered approach. So
Yes. I completely agree. I see a lot of times, especially with newer business owners,
yeah.
a scattered approach. And then what I see is they try something and they're not getting this immediate result of a brand new client or, a spike in their engagements or their followers, and they think it didn't work. And we all know that consistency is king and you have to show up and you have to keep showing up, but there has to be some strategy behind it. So I would really want to dive into, you believe in, and you talk about this 360-degree approach.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would like to kind of break that down step by step and get your intake, kind of your thoughts on each element. So take us through what you mean by 360-degree approach.
Yeah. So just on your point about timing, it takes a long time to see results when it comes to marketing a business, right? There are no quick fixes. There's no magic bullet. I think a lot of times people think, oh, I'll just run an ad and that's going to all of a sudden,
Yeah.
just flip the switch and you're going to be, you're going to have a packed tasting room. It's not that simple, and you need to have a lot of foundations before you can start running those ads. So 360-degree approach really looks at that, like holistically, how are we creating a brand that resonates with people? Who are our ideal customers and how are we speaking to them? That's like all of the groundwork that we need to lay before we even do any actual posting on social media or updating of the website, really diving into who's our target audience and, how can we appeal to them? And diving into your values and your unique selling proposition, right? So that's something I talk about all the time, especially when we're talking about advertising. You can't, if you think about a winery, it can be really hard. Wineries, what is your differentiating factor? A lot of times it's going to be your personal story. So even if you're a small business, it's usually your personal story because people want to buy from people. They don't really want to buy a brand unless you're like Nike or, I don't know. I was just at the gym, so that's all I can think of.
Yeah.
Nike and
Coca-Cola,
Adidas.
or, those big ones. Yeah, the big ones. Right. No, I love
So,
that. People
yeah.
buy from people. So we need to be very cognizant of the fact that we are putting ourselves out there, which I feel like might also be one of the things that inhibits small businesses from the way they market is they don't want to put themselves out there. They don't want to be the face. And, there's all sorts of mindset things, and that's a whole nother conversation, right? But do you feel like that's a key element for small businesses? They really kind of need to
Huge
show
element.
their face.
It's a huge element. It's like um and I understand. I mean, I have my own business and it was like very uncomfortable for me. For a long time, I stood behind my work. I didn't showcase, my face in any of my marketing materials. It was all like my client work, but it's not effective. People really they don't care. And I see this in social media too, because obviously I'm on the ground, like posting content for clients, evaluating what content works and what doesn't. And I can tell you across the board, it doesn't matter what kind of business you're in. If it doesn't feature a person, okay, sometimes with the caveat of if you're in a winery and you have a beautiful view that people love, okay, that does well. But a lot of times, oftentimes, the content that performs the best is the most engaging, is content centered around people. So, for example, like if you're a hair salon and you feature your stylists like in their natural behind the scenes element, that will outperform any kind of like, hair photos, photos of work.
You know what? I've learned that in my own business. I started marketing my business with all these practical tips on how to grow your local business and statistics and things like that. But the ones that do the best are the ones of me and my family,
Mm-hmm.
me and my dog, me on vacation. And I do try to put a story in there about growing a business because let's be real, small business and personal life, they intertwine. There's no getting around it. It's not separate.
Yeah.
And so I think you're right. I mean, I have noticed that for myself, that when I put a little bit more of me in there and my family and what I'm up to, I get more engagement. So
Yeah, definitely.
let's talk about the 360 degree. You talk about like different pillars, buckets, whatever we want to call them for marketing. Maybe you could kind of share with us a tip for each one. So let's start with website. Obviously, in today's world, we all need a website.
Mhm.
I feel like a lot of small business owners kind of fix it and forget it. How much attention, how often, what do we need to be doing with our website on a regular basis? What do you recommend?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I think it's really important to make sure that your website is modern. I think, especially in the wine industry, and there's reasons behind this because a lot of wine shipping is tied to regulation. So they're really like tied to certain platforms. So it's it's challenging to modernize your website. However, it really pays off. So I think getting on a user-friendly platform is really important. I mean, I personally love Squarespace. That is perfect for a small business. It's extremely easy to use. You do not need to know any coding. And it's easy to change. That's why I like Squarespace. And it kind of pushes people toward that versus like Shopify, you kind of get a little bit more tied down to a template and I mean, forget about WordPress. I like do not like it's like the bane of my existence. But yeah, so I would say that's like first and foremost is make sure that you're on a platform that is modern and easy to use and easy to update. In terms of updates, it's really going to depend upon, your business and what you're selling. I think for my winery clients, um we try to, update the photos more or less seasonally. So we're staying sort of relevant because obviously seasons and the rhythm of nature is very important to a winery. And it doesn't make sense like if it's the summer and it's beautiful and lush outside, you're seeing photos of like old vines that are, dormant over the winter. So those are some things, making sure that you have blog content as well. Obviously, if you can create some blog content, this would be helpful to increase your searchability on search engines, right? So for my clients, it depends upon, what kind of agreement we have, but we're generally publishing blog content at least once a month, but we try to do it a little bit more frequently. Again, that's depends upon your business, but it does help to have that to increase your SEO. So
Okay.
that's like a big thing. If you can, first of all, make it modern, and then second of all, I would say like focus in on blog content, creating long format content. If you're one person or if you just have an assistant, A really good tool to help you is ChatGPT or like any other AI. You can train it with your voice, with the content. You have to do a lot of editing. I have to tell you, I work with AI every day, multiple times a day, and it gets stuff wrong all the time, all the
Yeah.
time.
Mm-hmm.
It makes things up all the time. You have to fact check it because it will just make things up. It'll just pull in facts and figures that just don't exist. So, you gotta definitely make sure that you fact check it. And I don't know. I was all in on AI. Now I'm a little bit skeptical on it, but it is a good tool to help you if you're not a great writer or if writing isn't.
Right, exactly. Okay. So we've got the website. What else falls under the 360-degree email marketing? Is that still a thing? Is that still as
Yeah.
important? Is it
Yes.
dying? Are people still all about email?
No. So if you look at, I mean, I'm gonna keep pulling it back to the wine industry because again, this is like my biggest, client for more or less, or type of client. Anyway, my niche. So if you look at a winery and you look at how they generate sales online, not in the tasting room, majority of sales are happening on email. So email is not dead. Email, especially if you sell a physical product, it's really important. If you have e-commerce, email is it's going to be the thing that makes most of your revenue, and it's the cheapest tool
Okay.
to
So
use, right? So like
it's a good one.
if you compare it to digital advertising, you have to pay for, people to buy your product through a digital ad, right? Versus email, it's more or less free. Obviously, you have to pay for the email system, but like once they're in your system, it's a free client. So email is very important. I would say, like, as a small business owner, you should really figure out a strategy around this and a cadence to really create consistency and try to get out emails again, like at least once a month. It depends on your business. If you're an e-commerce business, you should be doing way more, and that should be your like primary focus.
Okay.
Um,
So what else falls in the 360-degree approach?
yeah. So next is content. Content is king. It's huge.
Hmm.
And then under that umbrella of content, right, like everything can kind of, blogs can fall under content. Even email could fall under content technically. So when I am thinking of content, I'm really thinking of video. Video is huge and it's a big gap. A lot of people don't have it. A lot of people don't know how to do it. And there's some good news around that. Turns out like iPhone video outperforms high quality, like hi-fi video.
Well,
Um,
that's encouraging for us small business owners that do not want to hire a video production and cannot afford to hire a video production team. So you're saying get out your iPhone
yeah.
and just take video.
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't start from there. I would probably, if you're not someone who's like on Instagram Reels, I would start with scrolling. I would start with looking at what your competitors are doing or what people that you see who are doing really well in your industry are doing. And then like use that as inspiration and create, versions of that on your own. Um, I would say start small, don't get overwhelmed, but look around at what other people are doing. I think it's still a pretty big opportunity, especially when you look at what other businesses are doing, because it's really hard. It really is challenging. I mean, I work in content. I do, I manage social media accounts for clients, and this is our biggest problem always. Ever since they've like launched Reels, it was getting video, creating like relevant video. If you are the type of owner who wants to be on video, that's perfect. Like if you're a business owner that wants to be on video, you'll kill it because a lot of people respond to people again. So it can be challenging if you're a business like a winery where you don't have, I know most of my clients, they don't really have ownership that wants to be like the face of the business or the brand. They don't have a winemaker that they, first of all, winemakers are super busy and always stressed out, I find. And they aren't typically people who want to be on video. Um,
Got to be behind the scenes, working in the,
yeah,
fields and working in production and
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, exactly. So that can be a little bit of a challenge. What I've done is really focus in on the customer and the consumer and showcasing the consumer as much as I can, right? Um, and staff, other staff, because a lot of times, people come to these tasting rooms and they really connect with staff. But if you look at what I'm saying, this boils down again to people and like focusing on people and not necessarily your product, focusing on your customer, what they want, what they need, how to make them feel, and also using, your staff, people
Yeah.
to love. So I think that's really important, especially as we get really far away from in-person contact and we're so on our devices and we're pretty isolated. I think people are craving human experiences. So if you can humanize your brand as much as possible, I'd say that's the way to go. So content really encapsulates social media management and capture. What I do for my clients, and again, it varies, but typically we're going on site once a month for like a capture of content, right? So instead of trying to make sure that you're doing it once a week, if I'm in the shoes of a business owner or manager, instead of like, oh yeah, I got to do this like every day or once a week, just pick one day where you are capturing photos and videos. Um, and
Great. Yeah, I love that. Great tip. And what I'm hearing over and over, which I think is the home run, and I would really hope people take back to their businesses, is people. Let's just showcase people, whether it's your staff, whether it's your consumers, whether it's your dog. A dog can kind of borderline be in that in that category. But like you said, people buy from people, people respond to people. And if we can start showing that a little bit more, that element, I think that's really key. So
definitely.
where do influencers, I know that was another one of your 360-degree approaches when we're talking about content. Where do they fit in?
Mhm.
Is that for every business, or do you just feel like there's certain businesses that really kind of, thrive from influencers?
I think every business can benefit from partnering with influencers. This is definitely more advanced. I think you need someone who's really focused full time, like their full time focus is marketing to be able to do all of this, plus
Right.
work with, influencers and because there's a lot of research that goes into it and then, contacting them, of course, and negotiating terms. It can be a bit of a hard thing to pull off if you are really busy. But working with influencers is really great right now, especially like if you think about the wine industry, it is behind on the times. Working with an influencer is really good because you tap into their audience. You can bring whole new consumers to the business, right? Like you can bring this youth that isn't really that into wine. So if you think about wineries, a lot of times what I'll do is we'll see like wine adjacent influencers. We love working with wine influencers too, obviously. That's like a low-hanging fruit. But think about like other type of people who might be interested in wine, but maybe, haven't experienced it so much in their life. So we try to, work with like food influencers because food and wine go hand in hand, bringing them on site. Um, so you can get really creative, and I think it's really fun to collaborate a lot of times, especially because the wine industry is so old school. A lot of these people are really okay with like a payment in kind. So they come on site, they have free wine, they have free, whatever food, and they get to bring all their friends and they get a VIP experience. That is usually enough. So I think like it's every influencer is going to be different. I also think it's really interesting to work with smaller influencers. You don't have to go after the really, really big influencers. You can go after the micro influencers, right? So like people with 20,000 followers or less. Um, so that's another, another avenue. And that does all kind of like fall under social media management.
Which I think that's really kind of creative to think about, because I think when we think of influencers, we think, oh, geez, I got to go find somebody to pay them. And, how do I manage that? And you're right. There's a lot of people that you can just collaborate with in your own backyard and just start small. Keep it small. Maybe they'll send out some information on your business. You send out some information on their business. And, the goal is just to get in front of other people's audiences, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And if you want to take it to the next level, one thing that I think is really great, if you're selling a product, you can give people and this is like more back end logistical stuff, but um, you can kind of incentivize, them to sell your product and then they get a portion of that sale, the influencers. So if you want to negotiate that way, I think that's probably the best because another pillar of all of this is measuring it. And it can be really hard to measure the impact of influencers. It can be hard to measure the impact of really any of these things that we've talked about, except for email marketing or like if you're doing e-commerce, you really can't say, you can't draw lines. I mean, you can draw correlations and make assumptions, but if you're a business that relies on foot traffic, it's very hard to say, uh, this one influencer increased our sales by X amount.
Right. And I think back to why do sometimes small businesses struggle and have unrealistic expectations is what you just said. It's really hard to measure.
It's
So
hard to, yeah.
obviously all this was such great information. And yes, it can feel very overwhelming. And you're not saying that somebody has to go out there and do all these things, blog twice a month, email once a week, have content everywhere, go get influencers. What would you say to a small business owner that's still doing their own marketing?
Mhm.
How can we leave them where they're not hyperventilating and thinking, oh my gosh, and then they just turn their head and they choose not to do anything, right?
It's really hard. It is challenging. And I left out like a few other really large parts of pieces of this puzzle, which are things that I do for my clients, which is press. So like making sure that I get as much press as possible for clients. So forming those relationships, and digital advertising, which is like literally its own offering in and of itself because it is just one piece of the puzzle. That works really well if you have an in-house marketer who's already handling everything else, right? So typically, you can't do digital advertising, and I'm talking about Google and Facebook ads primarily. Facebook also owns Instagram, so it's on both platforms. But okay, getting back to the question of if there's one thing that someone can do. Um, I really, there is not one thing that someone can do. I hate to say this. I think the best thing that someone can do is start, okay, and start with a plan and start with a structure and start with making sure that if you are one person who has to do all these other things, marketing needs to be, marketing and sales needs to be a top priority, right? Like it's not a secondary priority. It's not a, oh, when I get to it kind of priority. It needs to be a first priority. I understand. I'm a small business owner. I have people who work for me. But, and I get overwhelmed. And sometimes I don't do the things I need to do, like post on LinkedIn, which is really good. If you are a owner like us, business owners like us, LinkedIn is like the best place to be. So anyway, when you get overwhelmed, obviously things like sales and marketing kind of like go, they just fall away. You don't do them as much. But I think as a way to like get back to that is to remind yourself that this is a business and that you need to prioritize making money in this business. So sometimes when I'm really overwhelmed, and I don't know if this is going to be the same for everybody, right? But when I'm really overwhelmed in my own business, I think, okay, what are the things that are going to make me money? I need to prioritize those. And it's tricky because like I work really closely with clients, so I usually put their needs in front of my own business's needs. And that can be really hard, right? Because you feel guilty. You're like, oh gosh. But if you can at least once a day think about like, is there something that I can do to push my business forward? You need to be doing that. At least every day. And that might not mean taking action every day. It can mean thinking on it or creating a schedule or creating like a time, that you're going to create blog content or a time where you're just sitting down and looking at what other people are doing on social media. But I would say that's the really actionable step is like, can you set aside the time? And you need to make the time and you need to create the habit or you
You
need
know
to hire.
what? That is so powerful. And I call it the eat the frog. You hear that's a book out there and a very famous quote, eat the frog, which means do the hard thing first.
Mm,
And, you're right. Marketing and sales has to come first. And that doesn't mean scrolling on social media. That means being very productive. And I think what stops a lot of business owners and they waste time is because they don't have that plan.
Yeah.
So if you can sit down, block off time to just even do a month and look at what you want to talk about, what has to happen, and then just try to break it down so it doesn't seem so overwhelming. What happens is when you sit down for that half hour a day or 45 minutes, an hour a day, you know exactly what to work on. You're not sitting there going, oh, what do I work on now?
Yeah.
So I love that. Well, Molly, you are a wealth of information. You are very skilled in digital marketing and such an asset to the wineries and other small business owners. Tell me how people can get a hold of you if they would like to learn more and learn how they could work with you.
Yeah. Thank you. First of all, that was nice. It's always nice to hear that. Um,
Exactly. We don't hear it enough, I'm afraid.
no, not a small business. Yeah. So if people just want to like follow around, look at, the content, I'm really active on LinkedIn, which I think is going to be, you're going to link that. If anybody's interested in working with me, they can email me at molly@breadandbutterdigitalmarketing.com, which I'm sure you're also going to link. If they want to just look at some of my old, my current clients and case studies and work and kind of like what I do with clients and more granularly, they can go to my website. So those are the three ways. I'd say if you want to like follow along, especially if you're in the wine industry, a lot of my content on LinkedIn is going to be wine marketing related. So,
but even if you're not in the wine industry, you can learn so much from Molly. So
yes.
I will for sure put all those links in the show notes. And I just want to thank you again for just kind of sharing what's working, that we have to stay modern. We have to get out there digitally, no matter what type of business you are, and to not feel overwhelmed by it. Just break it down, right? If we just break it down, that takes the overwhelm out. So thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks, Jennifer.
I know we can feel very overwhelmed with what to do next when it comes to marketing. We can get caught up in the algorithms, we can get caught up in the return on investment, and just really start to wonder, where is my time best served? But as Molly pointed out today, you can't do it all by yourself. So choose what makes the most sense for you as the business owner in your industry and in your market, and just choose something. Start somewhere. And be sure that whatever you choose, that you show up and do consistently. If you can block off 15 to 30 minutes every day for marketing, eventually you will see the results of that. Thank you so much for listening. And if you could please do me a favor and share this with somebody that you know could benefit from some new, fresh marketing strategies for their business, I would really appreciate it. Until then, keep supporting those local businesses.